guest is here. But let me bring her on. She is the one, the only Kim Iversen. Kim, I don't know if I've had you on the show before, but just to give an intro, she's an independent analyst covering international domestic politics. She has the Kim Iversen Show. It's on YouTube, Rumble. I see you on Twitter sometimes, I think. I see you on Twitter sometimes.
Kind of.
Welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it, especially I always tell people this time in the morning, even though I'm not in the States.
Me neither.
I want to
It's
hit.
not morning for me. Otherwise, this would be way too early for me, Jamal, because where I normally would be, it would be either 4 or 5 in the morning. So California's 4 in the morning. It would be 4:15 in the morning. But I moved to Boise recently, back to Idaho, and it's 5:15 in the morning. Yeah. So, but either way, it would be still way too early to do this. So I think you're right. You haven't had me on the show before. Because it's too early for me.
Fair enough.
But I'm in Italy. So right now, since I'm in Italy, it is the afternoon. It is just 1:15 in the afternoon in Italy. So it's okay. So I can join you.
Well, you lived in California. So California, here we come. California. Yeah.
I just left. I mean, I just barely moved out of LA just in time to avoid all of this.
This is insane.
I moved in April. Yeah.
This is insane. And this is going to be the iconic picture of this riot.
Yeah.
Dude, in whatever the hell he's wearing, no shirt on, bare chested, holding up a Mexican flag with burning cars around him. By the way, just so people know, that's a Waymo vehicle. Apparently they have self-driving vehicles in California. And the protesters, rioters, were calling Waymo to get a vehicle there, and they're blowing up and beating the hell out of the vehicle. That is insane.
I mean, at least there was no driver, right? I mean, I guess if you wanted to burn a car, I suppose if you were going to do that, you'd want to get one that you could ensure there was no living human being inside of it, or a possibility of a living human being.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because you also have this was another part of the event in California. This one does have a living being in it, not just a living being, apparently a baby.
Yes.
It's just chaos.
Oof. Yeah.
Like, and I got to be honest with you, even if I accept your original premise that, and on some level I do, right? ICE agents would go into courtrooms, get the judge to evict the ruling, and then drag the person to, for detention or whatnot. Even if I accept your premise that this stuff is over the top, which I do, what the hell is that? And how does that in any way, like, I can show you videos of them raiding a sushi store, like literally hibachi Japanese steakhouse. It's like, are you serious right now? Raiding an Adidas store, raiding all of this stuff. And what you get is people from the left saying, this is clearly the FBI. And people on the right saying, this is clearly the FBI or Antifa or something else. Meaning, nobody wants to accept that, hey, you can get a riot by the government being overbearing, and you can get a government reaction from that is in the government's best interest. One last point before I bring you in. As I pointed out on Twitter the other day, I hadn't even seen this poll. I said, you guys are playing into Donald Trump's hands, the notion that you are waving Mexican flags on burning police cars, and you think the American public is going to be okay with that? This is the most recent polling that came out from CNN on this issue. And CNN doesn't want to show this poll. But here it is. Donald Trump was -21 on immigration. -21. He's jumped 22 points over the last week.
If we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket. Compare now versus 8 years ago during Trump's first term. Look at this. In his first term, Trump was way, way, way underwater at -21 points. But look at this. He's up over 20 points. Now, in the aggregate, he is in positive territory.
Give me your thoughts, Kim.
Well, I mean, I think that in June of 2017, the economy wasn't piss poor, right? We had actually a growing, building economy. And whenever the economy, and then COVID hit, the economy tanked. Under Joe Biden, things did not really climb back. So I think whenever, first of all, I just want to say that this isn't the only thing I have to say. So nobody jump down my throat on this. But first of all, I think that when the economy is bad, we find people blame others. That's just the natural reaction is who's to blame for this bad economy? Who's to blame for the prices going up? Who's to blame for the fact that we head to the grocery store, we fill up our carts and it's outrageously expensive. The price of homes has gone way up. The mortgage rates are really high. So you can't even buy a house, even if you have the money to buy a house right now. There's a lot going on and people want to point at others for that problem. That being said, Joe Biden in the Biden administration absolutely had essentially an open border policy, right? They were so against Donald Trump and Trump wanting to build the wall, so against Donald Trump wanting to limit immigration, which should be just a natural desire of a sovereign nation, is to have borders and control who goes in and out of your country. So because Joe Biden had that open borders policy, there is this natural reaction of the population that was saying, okay, now this is causing a huge problem. I don't know, and I've said this when I was a guest on Jimmy Dore's show, and people jumped down my throat. I still don't know, and I've said this on my show, I still don't know if all of the flood of immigrants coming into the country actually had a negative economic impact. I don't know. Now, we don't have the data really to prove that it had an economic impact. We could say, we could deduce and say, well, obviously if cheap labor is coming in and people are willing to do jobs for hardly any money, that's obviously going to drive labor wages down, right? But we don't really have the data to back up that all of these immigrants that came flooding in under Joe Biden. I'm not saying, now don't jump down my throat once again, I'm not saying that it was okay. I'm not saying
speak your piece. Nobody.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it was okay what Joe Biden did and that, we should just let these people in and stop worrying about it. I'm not saying that at all. I do think it's a concern and something we should absolutely stop. I'm just saying when it comes to the economic ramifications of it, I don't know yet. The data's not there to prove that all of these immigrants that came flooding in under the Biden administration actually had a negative impact on the economy. Now, of course, like I said, you could deduce that it would, right? There's ways to get there, but we just don't have the evidence of that yet. So for people who are economically not, people are in distress economically, especially in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, where the cost of living, which is why I left. I mean, the cost of living is just outrageous. You're paying a premium, like when I really thought about it, I thought, okay, I could buy literally the same priced house in Boise, Idaho, where I'm from, or buy, the exact same mortgage, for example, like take out the exact same loan, same mortgage. And even in Los Angeles, you're still paying a premium of about $1,500 to $2,000 per month on top of what you would pay if you were living in a place like Idaho or Texas or somewhere else. And that's because California has outrageous insurance rates because of the fires and the earthquakes. So the insurance rates have skyrocketed. There's a premium on just cost of living, taxes, property taxes are extremely high. Grocery bills are extremely high. Gas is extremely high. And our utility bills are outrageous in California. So when you put all that together, it's like, you have to sit there and think, is it worth an extra $1,500 to $2,000 per month to live in? And that's for any income level. If you are a server in LA and you're living in a 1-bedroom apartment, I guarantee you it costs you $1,500 to $2,000 more per month to live there than to live somewhere else. It's just, that's the baseline addition. Well, people can't. And so that's why people can't. So people, they struggle. They don't feel like they're in the position of life they should be in. And they take it out on somebody. Now, obviously, the people in LA are not taking the rioters or the protesters or whatever you want to call them. Obviously, many of them are rioting. They're not taking it out on the immigrants. They're not saying it's the immigrants. They're saying it's the government, right? The government is doing this to me. Whereas other people in the country are saying it's the immigrants doing this to me. But my point being, when the economy sucks, people are saying somebody else is doing this to me. And then it causes these, uprisings, these riots. And we just have such an authoritarian government on both sides of the aisle that both sides rise up at some point and start to go insane. I mean, January 6th, we saw a lot of them also get violent. Right. And George Floyd protests, we saw people, people just,
burning down police stations.
There's a human nature to when things get when things get riled up and people get riled up, that they, can kind of revert into this sort of animalistic behavior. But I do think that they need probably some sort of an instigator. And so it doesn't take much for maybe one FBI person or whoever it is, to instigate. And, when I look at all these Mexican flags, I'm like, where did they get these? I don't have an American flag laying around, or a Vietnamese flag laying around, or an Israeli flag laying around. Like, I just don't have these flags. Like, where are these people getting these flags?
I mean,
to
especially
go and protest and wave
this
them
thing
around.
is huge. Where the hell did he get a massive Mexican flag from on the fly? Where he's like standing on the police station, standing on a Wamo car, hiding his face. And, it's almost like they learned from January 6th. It's like, hey, hide your face, because everybody knew who that guy's name was. I can't think of his name, it'll come to me in a moment.
Right.
And he was like, I don't know, I'm going into the White House. I could be dead tomorrow, but I'm going into the White House. It's like, okay, well, that looks bad when you know that guy. He's on camera. He's saying this on camera. And then for whatever particular reason, the FBI doesn't even look into it. Okay, well, this looks bizarre. That's a hell of a flag that you got there, sir. And again, I'm not saying that
this is now marching in. I mean, this is, whether this guy was legitimate or not, now this is marching in a surveillance state against all of us. So this is how they get us on board with getting rid of our freedoms, with all of us cheering it on. And I can't even, I posted a clip from yesterday when I spoke about this on the show on my Twitter feed, and I got eviscerated by people in my Twitter feed saying, no, Kim, you're wrong. When I was saying, look, this looks like, they're just going to use this. Like, I don't think the president should be calling in the military to be using the military against American citizens and American cities.
I agree with you 1,000%. He shouldn't be.
Yeah, but but people are saying, yes, they should. This is different, Kim. Don't you know this is different? That yes, they should.
I don't care what those people say. The reality of it is Trump is instigating. He is. Look, I have to believe, for one, Trump, three things, actually. The White House has no issue. I don't know if those people are pissed off at the economy or pissed off at the way the government is acting on this issue. Donald Trump clearly has, let's say, a bias, and I'm putting it very nicely, a bias on this notion of immigration and immigrants. For God's sake, he's going after the African American Museum. He's letting in white South Africans, claiming that they're being genocided, while simultaneously kicking out Afghans who were effectively working at the behest of the U.S. As collaborators during the Afghan war. He clearly has a bias for one group over other groups based on the way that those groups look. So there's that. Two, H-1B1 visas, Trump doesn't take issue with. And meaning he is allowing indentured servants to come into the United States and take jobs from Americans. And so that is okay. But in this case, we don't like this. We don't like the fact. And I would wager between the two of these things, picking the cotton, picking the lemons, picking the oranges, those are things that I would wager to you that we would need even more. You would have to pay an American, what, $15 an hour, give or take?
Yeah.
To pick oranges?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is that American going to do that? And,
but I'm all for us finding out. If they want to get rid of all the immigrants, anybody that's not legally supposed to be here, fine. Like I say, deport them all, mass deportations, let's do it. Because then, because it will force, I believe, the government to finally do its job, which is fix the immigration system. Because I think if we did have mass deportations and we got rid of all these immigrants that are not supposed to be here, which, by the way, look, I'm only allowed to be in Italy for a certain amount of time. If I overstay my welcome, my 90 days that I'm supposed to be here, that, if I don't step foot out of the Schengen zone within, in 90 days, I'm illegally in this country, and I would not expect anything other than to eventually be caught and deported. That is, to me, a normal, what did you think was going to happen, right? I do have sympathy, a great amount of sympathy for those who came over here as children, underage. They didn't have a choice. Their parents brought them over. It's not like they could wake up and be like, hey, mom and dad, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, when they're 3 years old. So I have a lot more sympathy for the DACA kids, and I think that there needs to absolutely be something for them. Yeah. But otherwise, I think, look, you came, you knew you weren't legally here. You should expect to get deported, just like I would expect to be deported from here. And I think we should just do it, just rip the Bandaid off, get rid of all of them. And then once we get rid of all of them, we're going to realize, like what you're mentioning, Like, okay, now what? Now the price, we are American. Well, we'll find out. I mean, that's the thing is we won't know. We could sit here and we can guess. Like, I don't think Americans are going to want to do that job. Maybe they will though. And we have to find out. So we have to get to that point, find out what are Americans willing and not willing to do. And then say, okay, this is where we need to fill in the gaps, and we need immigration and we need this type of labor. And then Congress would maybe get off their asses for once and actually do a job and actually pass some laws and change the immigration system.
I don't know if I agree with you with the illegal immigrants. If you're going to do it, I guess go after people who are criminals first. But they are going after people randomly. I mean, like, it's almost a big show. Obama deported, 3 million people?
Yeah.
And, he is going to beat Donald Trump's numbers still. And so it's like, they're like 14, 15 million people who are here illegally. How much does that cost?
Depends on who you talk to. I mean, some people say 30, 40 million. I mean,
Okay,
I don't think,
I don't know. Let's even go, let's split the difference. 20 million
Sure.
people. How much is that going to cost? How much of a police force do you need to effectively deal with that? How do you,
but the scare tactic's working, right? I mean, we are seeing lots and lots of people. Well, not only have they stopped coming, but I'm seeing people self-deport. Like, they're actually loading up all their stuff. It's better for them to just load up all their stuff, be able to take everything with them and go back to Mexico or go back to El Salvador or wherever.
But kicking out students, it's not a scare tactic. That's just being an asshole. And even the Garcia thing, where the courts tell him, don't do this, and you ship somebody to a foreign country, that stuff is outrageous. Like, that's not even, we're talking about stuff that's illegal. Trump is complaining about illegality while doing things that are illegal, and then lying about the fact that he's doing about those things that are illegal. I guess my point is that protest is a reaction to an overreaction by the way the government is acting, especially with this knowledge that Donald Trump has. Again, I'm going to call it a bias on the very nicest as I can be about it, against people who have a particular political, let's say, color, persuasion.
No, so, I hear you on that, but I also just think that people in LA would protest anything at this point against Donald Trump and would blow up Waymo cars.
That is fair, right?
Yeah, I think that this was a trigger. Sure, it was just something to get upset about, and it was the thing to get upset about. But I think that, having lived in Los Angeles for over a decade, 15 years or something, the people are just, now there are a lot of conservatives in California, believe it or not. It is still, at this point, 1/3 of the voting population voted for Donald Trump in the last election. So you are still going to find a lot of conservatives, but the people who are very much against him are very much against him, and they're rabidly against him, and they don't even know why. They just hate the guy. They're just foaming at the mouth, hating him. And I think it just would take anything to piss them off, to get them to start lighting Waymo cars on fire and just being like, Donald Trump did this. It just so happens, though, that the immigration issue is one that they can claim, it's like the thing that, okay, yeah, they're rounding people up and they're deporting them. But, look, like the producer for my show lives in Latin America. I know lots of people who visit Latin America, live in Latin America, all over the area in various different countries. And one of my cousins lives in Guatemala voluntarily. Cool. Like I said, my producer lives in Nicaragua voluntarily. I've got people living all over. It's not a bad place. If you get deported back to one of these places, boo-hoo. Like it's not a bad thing. It's okay.
It kind of depends.
I hate to sound insensitive, but I really don't have sympathy. I just think it's like me getting deported back to the United States. Boo-hoo to me. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that one. I mean, look, the United States is involved in kill squads in these various countries. They have backed narco presidents, like what is the guy named Hernandez, the one who they end up putting in prison in New York when they had a coup of Zelaya. I think it's Zelaya. It's been so long since I talked about this story. Hillary Clinton had the guy taken out in his pajamas and was like, this is not a coup at all. This is perfectly fine. And the guy who they put in ended up being a narco drug lord who the U.S. is now, I think they've deported the guy and basically to the United States in order for him to be prosecuted. He said, I want to get drugs into the nose of every gringo. Okay, well, I agree with the premise. If we stop supporting with those countries and we just don't, Like, we still consider Donald Trump is trying to make an argument that Panama should give over the canal because he doesn't necessarily like the fact that there are Chinese investors into the Panama Canal. Okay, who the F are you? And
Well, we
even
did
with
build
this
it. I mean, the United States built it. So that was a project that the US paid for and built.
people can build whatever they want. You cannot ignore this capitalism thing at the point where it becomes inconvenient to you to ignore the capitalism thing. If
No,
meaning,
right. But okay, so look, like here in Europe, a lot of people think that the United States has fallen into full fascism, right? So, I mean, they look at the United States and they just think we're a disaster zone. They see these things that are going on. They see the mass shootings happen constantly, people that are getting shot dead, like that couple outside of the Bellagio yesterday or something. They're seeing all of this and they're thinking, wow, the United States is a failed state. So if they were to deport me, I'm sure there would be people here that would say, oh, we can't send her back to that fascist country. We just can't, it's awful there.
It may be three, Kim. Maybe three.
But I mean, it's still, it's there. Everybody's got anybody could say that country is awful. It's failed. There's issues. Every country has issues is my point. No, there is no country in South America or Latin America that is so devastatingly horrible that people need to just flee for their lives. I mean, it really isn't like Venezuela, really? Maybe. And that is because of the United States sanctions on Venezuela. But yeah, even then, I don't think that besides Venezuela, I don't think that there's anywhere. And even then, there's plenty of people who stay. You always have to think about, yes, there's people that flee, but the vast majority stick around. What kind of conditions are they living in? Are their lives awful when they're sticking around and staying where they're from? And remember, I come from a refugee family, and there's people in my life that potentially could be at risk of being deported back to Vietnam. I mean, it's not a bad country.
Vietnam is fantastic, but Vietnam is not South America. I mean,
yeah, it is. I mean, it's very similar in a lot of ways. It's a communist country. You can't. There's a lot of things you can and cannot say. By the way, if you go to Vietnam, you will not politically.
That's true in Europe. Europe just deported 3 or 4 people just because those people have a certain point of view that errs on the side of, let's say,
but
Russia
Vietnam
or
is genuinely a communist country, and I have family that I talk to on a very regular basis who still live in Vietnam, and we cannot talk politics. You
Fair
cannot.
Enough.
The government
I'm just telling
will
you, I enjoyed
monitor. No, I'm sure it's a great place, right? And so like I said, if I don't feel, unless you're being deported back to like Gaza or Somalia or someplace where it's like a genuine war zone and you're going to be facing famine, I don't think it's all that bad for you to get sent back to your country. Just like if I got sent back to mine.
That is very easy to say. It is very easy to say. There are people who are living in horrible conditions. There are people who are being threatened by gangs. There are all sorts of conditions that people are living in.
They have to deal with that. I mean, look, like I lived in LA. If I got deported back to LA, I'd be going back to these protests and these, and these Waymo cars being lit on fire.
I mean, you would be deported back to California. California is the size of literally a country. You can move to all sorts of parts in California. There are some extraordinarily rich parts of California. So that's not a fair comparison in regards to somebody
every
being
country
deported
has
to
rich
South
parts.
America.
Every country has rich people. Every country has.
Are you really comparing California to somewhere that I think that is a dramatic difference between having somewhere that is a state.
Tell me where
places like Beverly Hills that have all these
beautiful
beautiful
Latin America
places.
Are you totally opposed to someone being deported to? That it's so awful.
Totally opposed? It depends on the conditions that they came from. Meaning, it's not
what does it matter? If they were poor in those countries, they're poor and they need to build their countries.
That's easy to say. I mean, if there was somebody who was, let's say, under threat of gang violence, and you ask the question, why do so many other people stay? Many people stay because they have family connections and everything else there. I stay in the States because I have family connections in the States. Right. I would love to go puttering about the world, etc. I don't do that because I have a mom back home. I hope you get my point. Like,
that's why these people should go back, right? Their families are there, and they should be with their family members.
How do you know they have family?
Well, if that's where they're from, I would assume if they're in the United States illegally, that's because they didn't bring their entire family with them. They have families still because it was difficult
How
for them
did
to
you
get in.
know
So not
that?
all of them could make it. Well, because it's
How did you
difficult to
know
get
that?
in. Well, were they
No,
all
what I'm saying is,
crossing the
how did you
Darien
know?
Gap?
Are you telling me that everybody in the United States has family members that are still alive?
I mean, probably if they're from another country.
No, I'm talking about
Unless,
here. Let's just take here for a moment. Every
yeah,
person that is alive, all 320 million people that are alive in the United States, has family members in the
the vast
US.
majority of us do. Yeah, the vast
Okay,
majority
so
of us
that
have
is not
family.
all.
So there's,
I
of
guess
course,
I'm
there's going to
pointing,
be
that's not
like,
all.
right, but so you're talking about like these tiny little exceptions to the rule, and even then, if they're from another
I'm not
country and
saying.
they're illegally in ours, they need to go back. I mean, I don't have sympathy for this.
Just to be clear,
I don't, because there's
I don't
nowhere in
doubt.
Latin America that you could name off that I'm going to sit there and say, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't send them back there. Like
Just
that
to be
place
clear,
is so awful.
80% of your argument I agree with. Meaning, I don't doubt that the majority of the people who are here illegally, especially if it's like we're coming here for jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, fair enough, right? I accept the premise of, but dude, countries have borders, and they have borders for reasons. And what I don't want is people coming in dragging down the income level of the people in America. So
Right.
part of the argument I agree with. I'm pointing out that
But
there
it's
are
more than
exceptions
that.
to that. Go for it. What?
I mean, it's more than that. I mean, we have a culture, I think it's fair for countries who want to preserve a particular culture and a particular ideology or particular flavor, of whatever it is. I think it's fair for countries to want to vet and ensure that the people that are immigrating in and allowed to stay in and Europe is way more staunch on that than the United States. I mean, the US has been very like,
What they used to
come
do.
on in. Yeah, like Germany, for example, you want to stay in Germany, you need to learn German. I mean, they require it. You cannot be in that country past 3 years without
I'm
having
glad you
learned
mentioned that. Do you
German.
realize they are importing Syrian head choppers into Europe as we speak? I can show you the video where they're effectively saying, "Yeah, we're bringing them in. Everything is perfect. Okay, we're
Yeah,
pulling in
and
men from Italy."
and people are upset about that. And the countries, though, have had regulations that have required, yeah, they're relaxing on that, and that is what people are upset about. But they
Why
have
do you think
had
Oman is pissed off? Why do you
what's
think
that?
Slovakia is pissed off? I'm pointing out that this Germany or this Europe that you're talking about that is so hard-headed, like heavy-handed on the immigrant thing, is not. I've been to
No, they
Austria.
haven't
I've
been
been to
right. But what
Germany.
I'm saying is that they've had rules in place that are much more to maintain their culture than we've had in the United States. And whether or not they're, whatever they're doing right now in their kind of neoliberal importing of all these people in, that's kind of beside the point. I mean, they're doing that, but that is going against many of their own regulations and rules that they put in place that we've never put in place, is my point. I'm saying that we can put those in place. It wouldn't be totally out of left field to put those things in place because Europe had done it for a while prior to Europe having the current crisis that it's having. But so the United States, I think countries, my point being, countries can, and it's fine if countries want to put some limitations on who they're accepting in. I'm a bit hesitant, to be quite honest with you. If somebody is running from a gang in South America or Latin America, I'm a bit hesitant to let them in because why are you running from the gang? You're going to come in here. Is the gang going to come here looking for you? I don't want the gang here at my door. I don't want them
Again,
in
it
my
depends.
house.
I don't know. For me, it depends. Like I said, I agree with like 80% of your argument. Like if it's, I believe in borders. I believe the country should have borders and countries should vet who comes into the country. I thought that's why Joe Biden's policy was so ridiculous. Because Joe Biden was like, hey, just sign into my app. And you can fill out my app and then you can just right on in. And it's like, dude, are you out? It's like, are you insane? Are you out of your mind? And then like certain countries that didn't have relationships with the United States, there was no way to vet who was coming into the country. So it was basically a black box of random people coming into the US. It was very weird, like in the way that Joe Biden was doing it. And then, he'd be like, no, we're strong on the border. That was Kamala Harris's argument, right? I'm strong on the border. Just don't come. So I'm not an ideologue on this issue, but I do have sympathy for a country that has taken decades of using South America as if it was part of its territory and footstool and spent time overthrowing governments, destroying governments in those countries. I mean, for God's sake, we went after country, knocking over countries, putting in dictators in those countries left and right. How long does it take a country to recover from that? I was looking at this graph where an economist did with it, Pinckney. did, where he was talking about South America, or let's say the global South, and how the global South relates to Western countries, and how Western countries effectively raped those countries for like centuries. And that
Right.
if it wasn't for that, those countries in the global South, Europe would have been debtor nation. The US would have been a debtor nation. Well, it is now. But meaning this relationship that has taken place is a direct result of many times colonialization and the way that we've effectively treated those nations, not just as a byproduct of those nations. I'm pointing
Hey, I mean,
out.
Matt, you're preaching to the choir. I'm Vietnamese.
Yeah, yeah. But
I mean,
again, I agree with like 80% of what you're saying. I don't disagree with you entirely. It's the exception that I take issue with, where it's like there are conditions where I would be like, let that guy in, have a heart.
I mean, it would have to be the asylum. I have much more sympathy for the Afghanis who you mentioned, who were basically collaborators with the U.S.
Oh, they're
government.
going to get strung up if they go back. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got to stay. You can't send collaborators back in a war, during or after a war. I mean, you just can't do that. So I have a lot of sympathy for that. And I'm totally with you. I understand that the U.S. has collapsed many different economies. Look what we're doing actively to Venezuela.
Yeah.
We have done a lot of the damage to a lot of these countries, including Vietnam. I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really. So, but I still think that those countries, for one, oftentimes the people that leave, these are the best and the brightest of the country. I mean, they're the ones with the most gumption. They're the ones with the ambition. They're the ones with the guts, right? They're going to go and they're going to build a better life somewhere else. So those are actually the people you kind of want to keep around so that they'll help you build your nation back up. And I don't, how long does it take for a nation to build back up? Well, how long did it take Vietnam? 30 years from the time that the sanctions were dropped and the time that it has been, the trade has been allowed between the United States and Vietnam. It's been a 30-year process. So 30 years is how long it takes. So
That's argument for China, right? Where the
What's
Chinese students, because if you look at the ones who are like the top engineering students, especially in like not software, maybe software, but definitely like manufacturing, those type of things, those are Chinese students. And Trump is effectively kicking those students out. And you would have people in China saying, we don't want you to leave. We would prefer you to stay in China because
Right.
you are effectively a brain drain. Even though many of the top students around the globe are from China, we would prefer you to stay here also. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, man, but can you really tell? Like, talking about culture.
But those aren't illegal immigrants, right? I mean, those are
They're not illegal immigrants.
Right,
The Chinese
but
students aren't
he's-
illegal.
Sure, but he's also trying to. I think the idea is give America back to Americans, and then let it shake out. But you kind of have to. You have to go through that first in order to figure out where the holes and the gaps are. And we don't really know because we've been just importing people in, whether it be illegally or legally or through HB1 visas, like you mentioned, which I have a problem with those. I mean, at this point, the U.S. needs to shake it all, shake it all out, and then just see where we're at. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with this shaking it all out and seeing where we're at as a country. And then saying, oh, well, it turns out we actually need these engineers from China. We actually need the HB1 visa workers, unfortunately, like these companies claimed. We actually need all of these immigrants that are coming in across the border to work on our farms. We actually need this, and then we can actually make those adjustments.
Those companies are lying. And fact of the matter is, I want students coming into this country. I mean, I have zero issue with students who are going to be a benefit to this country, come into this country, because those people tend to stay. And you get like 40% of immigrants building businesses in America?
Yeah. I don't know if the Chinese ones will. I think at this point they'll go back to China. Have you seen China?
Well, yeah, because Donald Trump is effectively pissing them off.
Well, not only that, but I mean, when I do regular, like those YouTube video walkthroughs where people just walk through cities, and I just like to watch these kind of walking city.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Some of the cities are gorgeous.
China is amazing. I mean, even areas where they claim are poor, there's walkthroughs of those areas, and they don't look that poor. I mean, China is amazing. And my cousins who live in Vietnam, they go to China regularly. And they say China is, it's like, I have one cousin he's Chinese, and he has been going to China for decades. And he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, the amount of change that China has gone under in the last 30 years is like night and day. You
It's
don't see
astonishing.
homeless people. Like people, and the joke was, we were at dinner and one person in my family says, yeah, you don't see homeless people because they hide them. And he was like, yeah, in homes. You don't hide them in homes.
Right.
Right.
It's
Like,
such a change.
it's,
It is such a change. I mean, like,
yeah, and it's
Americans
very
don't quite get it.
clean and it's extremely
Yeah.
futuristic. And they say, you know, like they say that China is incredible, but they do say as well, and this is my Vietnamese family living under communist Vietnam, they say, yeah, but the Chinese are less free than the Vietnamese. Like, even though Vietnam and China are both communist countries,
It's a
the
communist
Vietnamese will
country.
say we're freer than China. That China
Yeah, it's a communist
China
country.
has to clamp down quite a bit in order to get to that level. They've had to squash a lot of dissent. People are not, you know,
Mhm.
those things are true. And that is according to my family that lives in that part of that world, that lives under a communist country, communist government, you know, not an American talking point. I know people want to make that like, oh, Americans are always just trying to say that people in China aren't that free. Try living there, blah, blah, blah. I'll talk to a lot of white Americans who are expats in China, and they'll say, no, it's free, it's fine. They don't really know because they're not native
They don't live
Chinese. Like,
there. Yeah.
yeah, it's different when you're native. And my cousin, who's married into the family, and he's Chinese, is natively Chinese and lives in Vietnam now. And they say something a bit different, that it is
See, I
not
think
as
maybe a little
free
bit of
as
both.
people think.
And I know that sounds weird. I'm just trying to split the baby on this because I think it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah,
If you
I'm sure it
agree,
is.
like, for example, if you're a Democrat and you are living in a Democratic city, you're fishing water. Like, you
Right,
agree.
yeah,
And
right.
because you agree, you're not pushing any boundaries. It's just,
Sure.
oh, I'm free as a bird. Everything is great. Oh, yeah,
But
we
if you're
should
a
have censorship.
Republican living in California, you might feel a bit
Oh,
different, right?
yeah, right. It's like this
Good
fascist
point.
dictatorship,
Great
right?
point. Yeah,
These
that's a good
commies.
point. Yeah.
I mean, because there is a middle ground, right? There is a space of both where if you have like 90% of the Chinese saying, yeah, my government is competent, I agree with what they're doing, they may actually agree. In which
Yeah.
case, they don't see the
And
water.
it's always different being foreign in a country. Like here in Italy, I could totally live here. I don't know anything really about their politics, right? You know, I don't speak
Right,
Italian
right.
well enough to like really know what's going on, and I don't
Oh,
care.
Maloney
You know,
is
I'm just here
gorgeous.
enjoying,
Oh,
like
I would
drinking
worship that
my
woman.
Aperol spritz and eating my prosciutto. Like I don't care. So you know, I love it here.
It's different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different when you're a foreigner. You're not thinking of the politics to that detail, to those levels, that somebody who's born and raised and understands everything and has seen the evolution of things. It's a very different experience for natives than it is for foreigners.
I would worship Maloney. She is gorgeous. That woman is gorgeous. One of the guys, I can't think of where the guy was from. He was from an African country. He like kneeled when she came, and the guy was like, "Why are you kneeling to her?" It's like, dude, look at her. She's gorgeous. I was here in Malaysia. And one of the guys, he said, somehow we got on the subject of politics. And as we were talking about politics, he says, you know, if you criticize our prime minister, the police will come to your door. And the guy had me in stitches. He was like, they'd be like, hey, why are you ragging on our prime minister? Don't you know he's doing the best for you? He's doing as great as he can for you. I said, no way. He says, yes, they'll do that. They would come knock on your door and he would effectively take you away and they would effectively browbeat you saying, why are you talking shit about our prime minister? It's the funniest thing in the world. But you don't know that when you are a visitor and a guest.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll have to ask my other cousins. I have Malaysian cousins also who are Malaysian citizens still. I'll have to ask them if that's
I like it here. I mean, it's nice.
Yeah.
People seem to be cool, but I felt that way about Albania. Even though, you know, long as you don't bring up NATO, you're fair game in that, like in Albania, right?
Right.
It depends on what you bring up.
Malaysia is a majority Muslim country. My family's like a minority Buddhist, Chinese natives from Malaysia, and but yeah, it's a majority Muslim country, and
no bacon.
No bacon.
That's the downside. No bacon. No bacon.
Meanwhile,
That's
here
the
in Italy,
downside.
I got all kinds of pork.
Oh, the
Pork
food is so
everything.
good. Yeah, the food is so